Thank you again, Dr. Warren, for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate it and look forward to what you're going to present. I just want to do a quick welcome and thank you for those that are here attending to listen to Dr. Warren's talk this afternoon. We are hosting this as the Community Engagement Outreach Core of the Great Plains IDEA CTR. So we hope that you can enjoy this talk and find some nuggets of knowledge for your own work or future work that you are planning. I just wanted to give a warm welcome, but I will boot it over to Emily so she can do a proper introduction for Dr. Warren.
Yes, so we are delighted to have Dr. Michelle Warren with us today for our Community Engaged Research Interest Group talk. Dr. Warren is the Director of International Studies at the University of Nebraska at Kearney and an Associate Professor of Spanish. And Dr. Warren has worked extensively with populations and movement in the classroom through theoretical and ethnographic research and through advocacy pieces for vulnerable populations in central Nebraska, primarily Spanish-speaking people. Her academic training includes advanced degrees in Spanish, language and culture, and years of time living abroad. Dr. Warren's time at the University of Nebraska Kearney has facilitated her and afforded her steadfast relationships with many central Nebraskan first-generation students and their families from Spanish-speaking countries. And she's been able to weave these threads and relationships into her interdisciplinary mixed methods research project working with migrant populations in the central Great Plains. So we are super excited to have Dr. Warren with us today. If you have any questions or comments throughout the talk, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom toolbar. And as a reminder, we will be sending a satisfaction survey after this talk today. So I hope you all enjoy this talk, and let's welcome Dr. Warren.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Emily, it's such a pleasure to be here, and Kiana, thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. I'm more than just a little bit nervous because, as you can tell from my bio, I'm mostly a humanities scholar. So I have a feeling that I'm in a room with a lot of scientists, and I'm not sure, but you know, y'all are real smart. So anyway, I'm hoping that some of the experiences that I have can be helpful for you as you're looking to work with community. As Emily said, I've worked a lot with populations and movement over my career. I just completed my 31st year of teaching. And the first year of that was actually in migrant education, as a migrant ed teacher in the front range of Colorado, working with kiddos whose families would move to and fro with the crops, which is actually something that's come full circle because the most recent project I've been working on is with Dr. Rusty McCullough, among others, lots of other really great team members on his RADX project. And we are working directly with migrant education, families involved in the migrant education program. So it's a passion of mine that's existed for a really long time, since I was like 21 and just fresh out there teaching. So something that's really interesting that I hadn't anticipated. I was away from Nebraska for about 20 years, did my undergraduate degree here at Kearney, went away, did my graduate work, and I taught in lots of other places in the meantime. And when I came back to Kearney in 2013, I found that in our major, which is modern languages, specifically Spanish for me, I'd say somewhere between 65 and 75% of the students that we have in our upper level classes are heritage speakers of Spanish, and they are representative of that first generation of immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries, anywhere from some from South America, mostly from Central America and Mexico. So lots of people from Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico. So it's a culturally rich area. And I found, well, as I'll explain a little bit more in depth, but I found that the people that I was teaching in their classes I would have them in repeated groups a lot of times, and I would become close with them as well as with their families. So I started realizing the stories that those families had to offer. And that's kind of how I shifted my studies from working in a bit of an ethnographic approach to theater and performance studies, where I would study identity and ethnicity through theater performance into looking more at identity and issues related to identity through the study of oral histories, the gathering and the study of oral histories. So I titled this talk, Finding Our Way Around Town, How Studies Can Both Garner Knowledge and Fulfill Community Need. And hopefully the message will be clear throughout this talk that this has to be a two-sided relationship. We have to make sure that we are not mining or excavating, as it were, the communities that we're working with, because we need to do our best to be stewards of the information we gather, stewards of the communities that we're sharing. So I use the word neighbors a lot of times, our non-English speaking neighbors. So that's something that you might hear me talk about. So when I say our town too, that's somewhat figurative, because the communities that I work with are mostly, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with central Nebraska, but most of the communities I work with are in central Nebraska. From Grand Island heading west towards Lexington, including Kearney and Hastings in the middle there. And we've actually recently ended up working with people who are as far west as Scotts Bluff, and some folks in the Sandhills as well. So, like I said, I'm at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. Here's a beautiful aerial view of our campus. For those of you who haven't come, I would encourage you to visit us. That's actually one of our mentors in modern languages. She was Madame Robert, who was a professor of French in the earlier days of the modern language department. So today we'll look at my community-based research activities, how I've engaged partners and forged partnerships among primarily Latinx immigrants in my region, how those relationships have been successfully formed and also maintained, how my research teams and I have overcome potential obstacles. This is a little outside of the community issue, but it involves community, how I've attempted to create enticing grant proposals, what sources I have pursued for funding. So my background, as I mentioned, I did work in migrant education, and Emily did say too that I've had a lot of international experience. So I've had an opportunity on my own to know what it's like to be a stranger in a strange land. I've lived extensive amounts of time in France and Spain, Mexico, Argentina, and then have shorter stays all over Latin America. So I understand the discomfort that can sometimes go along with language barriers, as well as cultural misunderstandings and barriers. So that, I think, helps me to understand sometimes the plight that people go through when they come here from other places. As I mentioned, my main studies had to do with ethnography, identity through performance, and usually that was through traditional theater, although I did work with some performance art as well. But then when I discovered the demographics of the undergraduates here in Kearney, our majors and minors, and our high amount of students who were from those first gen families whose parents had come here and forged a path for their kids, it became clear to me that we had an entire wealth of stories and situations that were shareable that really we didn't know a whole lot about. So I actually have been fortunate enough to be included in a lot of family work, not just work, family fun and family pleasure, because I've been included in all kinds of events like quinceañeras, birthdays, graduation parties, Some families I will meet to go to mass with them. I feel very close to a lot of the families because we will have students in repeat classes, and then we'll also frequently have siblings who will come through. So there are many families that have come through our program that I know, 3 siblings or more sometimes, not usually more than 3, but what I'm saying is I feel like we get a chance to really become close with the families. And I've also taken the opportunity of having parents visit class because when I teach, particularly my cultural history classes, I'll study, for example, the Civil War in El Salvador, and I'll have one of the moms who escaped from El Salvador under a false identity so she could avoid being persecuted by the military there. I'll have her come and talk to my students, and she'll tell them what it was really like firsthand to go through some of that political turmoil. So my current interest has become a performance in oral histories. And I have really, really appreciated knowing that our students that are coming through our programs are going to be the first university educated generation of this population. And I really feel that they're tomorrow's promise. So the progression, this sort of organic progression of the main projects I've been working on over the past maybe 5 years. First, I came out with Coming to the Plains, and I would have been in charge of organizing our team for Coming to the Plains. Our initial team also consisted of one of the archivists from UNK's library, Lorinda Weezy, as well as a videographer from our communications program, Jacob Rosdell. That was our core team. And so we created a traveling banner video installation based on an oral history project that explores the experiences of Latinx people who have come to Nebraska, basically central Nebraska. And I'll talk a little bit more about that project. And then the next projects were somewhat born out of the world that became our world when COVID hit. So MyLink is the next project that I really worked a lot on, which is a social services digital app. We brought this digital app from the eastern part of the state to the central part of the state to help provide information on social services in multiple languages. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I worked with Dr. Chandra Diaz from our College of Education here at UNK for that project, and many other community members. And then finally, I was fortunate enough to be pulled in to work because of my community relationships with Dr. Russell McCullough and his research team from UNMC on the RADx Up NIH grant that he's currently on. This is a whole new territory for me because, again, I'll repeat, as a humanities scholar, receiving external funding is not unheard of because I do work a lot with Nebraska Humanities as well as the Arts Council, both locally and at the state levels. But to have a major national level grant in the sciences is certainly something that's new territory for me. It's just something that a lot of my colleagues in the humanities don't really go into unless they happen to be working in medicine, humanities, medical humanities. So RADx Up, and I'll talk a little bit more about that too toward the end. RADx Up is a community-based project, and it's designed to keep kids in school by providing a symptom checker app and an in-home COVID testing program for families who are involved in Nebraska's Migrant Ed program. And again, I'll explain a little bit more about how that all works as we move forward. I'm going to apologize in advance because I have a dog who will probably continue to bark off and on, depending on how many rabbits and birds we get in the backyard. So first, I want to talk to you a little bit about Coming to the Plains. This was my first endeavor into oral history, and it turned into a traveling banner and video installation. Thanks to, again, the videographer that we worked with, Jacob Rosdell, we were able to capture a pretty high quality video product of the interviews that we conducted. And then, of course, thanks to the archivist, Lorinda Weezy, we also were able to conduct interviews that she was well trained in oral interviews. So we explored the experience of Latinx people who've come here to live. And my project on this ended up involving people from all over Central America, the countries I've mentioned before: Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico primarily, but also Colombia. And I think, we have a Dominican participant as well. So we really have quite a broad diversity of countries represented. We also have a diversity of ages and professions. We have well, I'm going to show you a little clip from it, but we have people of all ages, and it's nice to see a real range of the experience. So the goals of this project were to, first of all, to gather stories from our neighbors about their experiences. We wanted to know those stories, especially after having the mom visit my classroom and talk about her experiences escaping El Salvador. It felt really important to figure out how those stories make the fabric of what our community is made of. So the second main goal was to fill a void in our library's digital archive. So, the digital archive is something fairly new, but it really should be representative of the population around us. And Nebraska's population, as of the last census, was 11%, a little bit better than 11% Hispanic. So we wanted to start contributing to that level of representation in our archives. So that's something that's helped. We also were very interested the political atmosphere during the time that we began this project in 2017. There was a lot of negative speak and negative rhetoric going around about immigrants and what they did, the bad things that happened with immigrants in our country. And we wanted to make sure that we could dispel some preconceived notions of what it means to be Latinx. We wanted to make sure that it's known that some of the stereotypes that float around in the media, as well as in popular culture, are not necessarily true. Not all Latinx people are criminals or in gangs or fill in the blank for the stereotypes that abound. So we wanted to dispel those notions. We also hoped to elevate those stories to a level of art, which would be worthy of view in museums or public settings. And we have been able to do that. We've actually displayed at university libraries, from UNO to Wesleyan to UNK's University Library. I believe we still have an exhibit up in Lexington in their public library. We worked with the Grand Island Public Library, and I'm in talks with the director of MONA. Not sure if we're going to be at the Museum of Nebraska Art in Kearney eventually, but we've displayed at the World Theater and shown our documentary there. We've displayed at the Center for Great Plains in Lincoln. And the list goes on. The most recent, we were at a gallery in the Old Market, which was really wonderful in Omaha. So we've really tried to do that. We've tried to make this project into something that's exciting and visually pleasing and intellectually stimulating. So those were some of our main goals when we were doing this. So Coming to the Plains, of course, is the title of this. And this, I apologize, the way that this came through. The exhibit consists of banners that are about 8 feet tall. And on the banners, we have titles. I don't know, I think you can see my cursor, but each of the banners is titled by something like My Journey. Some have to do with education, some have to do with work, some have to do with family. And then we selected quotes. These are all here participants in our program, in our oral history program. And we took the quotes from these people and we printed them on one side of the banner in original language. This would be the original language. So you can see there's Spanish, Spanish, English, Spanish. And then on the reverse side of each banner, we have the translation presented in the exact same format of their quotes. this is just an invitation. Everything we did was bilingual, and we tried really hard to make sure that we did not allow one language to be dominant over the other, even as far as like how we positioned things, whether we were putting something to the left or to the right. We didn't ever want it to appear that English was more important than Spanish, or that Spanish was more important than English. So we tried a lot of side by side, front and back. Here, I have a link up, and I think it will let me go to this link so that you can see at least the very beginning, and hopefully
these are the stories of our families.
Estas son las historias de nuestras familias or neighbors.
I will only play just a little of the initial. You'll hear the original music that we used in this, and also we have original poetry that it kind of punctuates some of the stories.
And ourselves. Y de nosotros mismos. And how we've made our homes in central Nebraska.
Y cómo hemos formado nuestro hogar en el centro de Nebraska.
This is coming to the plains.
Coming to the plains.
Llenando las llanuras.
Can I do a quick check and see, Emily, are people able to hear?
Yep, we can hear.
Yep, we can hear.
I'm just going to show a little bit more of this. I'll show a portion of the first participant here.
Desert. The sun wants to melt me into sands that would cover the reminders of me. Wants to bleach bones left exposed, turn them into landmarks passers-by will ignore. Desert object 1, zapatos, shoes, a child size 3, worn, they know more miles than they should. How old were you? Do the number of holes in the soles match your losses?
Busco siempre a estar unida a Dios. Y entonces un día yo estaba lavando mis trastes en la casa y yo sentí que Dios dijo, un día tú vas a contar tu historia enfrente de una cámara. Y yo dije, oh, no, gracias, eso no es para mí. Mi vida en El Salvador era feliz. Yo estaba feliz con mi familia, estudiaba, tenía trabajo. No era un sueño venir a los Estados Unidos, como otras personas que dicen, me gustaría ir a los Estados Unidos porque no tengo dinero. No, yo lo tenía todo, pero mi vida estaba en peligro. Me sentí en peligro. Yo trabajaba en una farmacia y de repente a ese lugar le pusieron una bomba y entonces nos unieron a todos. Pensaron que todos éramos personas que estábamos haciendo mal a la sociedad. Ellos nos decían que estábamos nosotros colaborando con la guerrilla, pero eso no era cierto. Mi mamá contó, yo creo que la vida de mi hija está en peligro y ella estaría mejor lejos, viva, que yo tenerla que enterrar aquí. Yo la quiero a ella a salvo.
Mi familia y yo venimos a los Estados Unidos porque
I'm going to move forward just a tiny bit here because I wanted to show you really quickly my student Enedina, who was actually a DACA recipient, and she's around 20. Enedina wasn't sure if she would be able to go to college, and her uncle actually handed her over the border to her mom, or vice versa. So I'm going to play just a tiny bit of Enedina's interview.
It was just high enough for my mom to reach over her hands and toss us over to my uncle that was on the other side. So my older sister was put over the border first, and then it was me, and then my mom jumped over the border. My dad was already in the United States.
La verdad que fue muy difícil cruzar yo sí me.
And it's hard for me to stop because I always think, oh, everybody should see at least one more story, but I'm going to stop right there. Because I wanted to tell you, so Enedina at the age of 17 wasn't sure if she'd be able to go to school. She was able to go to school on DACA. And what I was saying about these kids being our community's future, Enedina went to school, got her teaching degree, taught ESL in Omaha for maybe 2 years. And this past year, she completed her master's degree in counseling, and she's now a school counselor in Omaha, I believe at Omaha South. And she just sent this, this note from another first-gen DACA student that she had, thanking her, saying, hey, if it weren't for you, I don't think I would have known what I could do. So these are people who are going out and really making incredible change in our community. And Edina is, along with maybe a team of about 10 other Latinx students who were with me while we were working on this project, who did considerable work in conducting interviews, transcribing and translating interviews, and also working on publicity and sharing, dissemination of the project. So Enedina was with me the last time we did we did a presentation in Omaha. So it's pretty cool to see that. So as with everybody and everybody's careers, everybody's lives, the coronavirus came along and everything kind of came to a screeching halt the way that we were doing things before. I was preparing a book manuscript. I wanted to publish a book of Coming to the Plains, but it became evident when the virus came along that it was time, I say here, switching the esoteric for the pragmatic. I think I said it backwards on my screen, but the idea was we had to kind of throw away this heady idea that we were going to start making things visible in museums and libraries, which is all really great. But the reality, the day-to-day reality, the spring that the pandemic hit, was that I had friends and participants, families of our participants and of my students who, I mean, if we were all confused as educators and researchers from higher institutions of education, imagine with a culture and a linguistic barrier, the kind of confusion that abounded among people that were not English speakers and new to the country. So, one example that came about was a friend of mine she was a PA working in Lexington at the urgent care clinic, and there was absolutely no information for her to give to her students, her patients who were Spanish speaking at this point. And this is just at the very beginning of the pandemic. Nobody knew what to expect. Nobody knew what was happening. And she was just pulling her hair out. Of course, she had some colleagues that were Spanish speakers in Lexington. There are some Spanish speaking practitioners, but she was really frustrated, and she contacted me and asked what could be done about it. And the other thing was, one of the families that participated, their daughter did a lot of work on our project, and both the mom and the dad were interviewed for the project. The dad got sick. He was a Tyson meat cutter. They tried to take him to the clinic, and he doesn't speak any English. Even though he's been here for 20 years, he didn't know enough English to really work his way through the clinic. They wouldn't let the daughter go through into the clinic room with him to explain that they thought that he had coronavirus. They called him later that day and said, "Sir, we're happy to tell you that you do not have the flu." So they didn't even give him a corona test, a COVID test at that point, which all of us were confused at that point, but the fact that language and cultural barrier made it so hard just to get treated. And he did end up having COVID. As did so many of the essential workers, which of course this impacted a lot of our students' families, because a lot of them work both in Grand Island and in Lexington in the meatpacking industry. So, we have shoulder to shoulder working situations, and before the meatpacking plants actually made their attempts to create a safer working environment, those essential workers were forced to work every day side by side. And a lot of the families live in multi-generational households, which is very culturally appropriate and typical. And that was somehow demonized with some of the political talk around our state. So it became really obvious that we needed to do something. So Two Rivers, which is our public health association around central Nebraska, it has the 7-county area right around Kearney, along with Buffalo County Community Partners, tried to get something rolling. I have the utmost kudos for Denise Weiner and Buffalo County Community Health Partners, because they were just an incredible force in rounding up the troops and figuring out how anyone interested all around the state could come together to facilitate care and meet the needs, not just health needs, but all the other socioeconomic needs that come about because of the pandemic of our non-English speaking neighbors during the pandemic. So I list Buffalo County Community Partners here. I did have a link. I think, Emily, that this PowerPoint will be shareable afterwards, right? I'm not sure if she hears me, but anyway.
Yes, we will share it.
Okay, so if you'd like to go to the Buffalo County Community Partners website, there's a link here. Denise Weiner is the executive director, and she actually had working with her maybe 4 of the people working with her were bilingual, biliterate, and able to create and then disseminate materials in Spanish, at least, to get us started. Martha Mafileño, who she just has my highest respect. She works with the community partners. Martha began, under Denise's direction, she began a weekly meeting we called it Bilingual Community Helpers back at the time. Not all of us were bilingual, some of us were, and we had people as diverse as, I feel kind of embarrassed because I'm not looking at who's on here, and maybe some of the people who are on here, maybe some of the people who are on this call were part of that group. Gisela's here. Oh, yay. I'm just looking through the list. Athena Ramos, who's from public health at UNMC. That's about as far east as we went. We also had Josie Rodriguez, who was working for DHHS in Lincoln. She was working with the multicultural bilingual stuff from DHHS at that point. And we had representatives as far west as Scottsbluff and North Platte that would participate in our weekly calls. Local people, board members from BCCP, also, local doctors, local social workers, people from our free clinic who wanted to figure out, like, what the heck do we do? Right. So this was really huge what BCCP did throughout this. And they brought together a lot of community organizations. For me, this was actually a chance for me to get to know and garner relationships with the other side, because I already had relationships with the Latinx community, but I then got to know a lot of people that are in the agencies that provide services for all of our community neighbors, whatever the background, language, or culture be. So it became apparent that we needed to have information available in more than one language. So my colleague, Dr. Chandra Diaz, and I actually wrote a grant for something called MyLink, which is a digital app. If you don't have it, you can download it now. Dr. Diaz knew about MyLink because she had a colleague in Lincoln through Lincoln Public Schools who had actually created and implemented MyLink in Lincoln. So it was LNK, like the abbreviation for the Lincoln Airport. MyLink is an app that I'm trying to see if I did have a link to MyLink. MyLink is an app that sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's an app that actually helps people locate social services for any of their needs. I'm going to just go to my link. I hope you can still see my screen. Can you see my my Chrome page now?
Yep, we can see it.
You can see it? Great. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my link. This is the coolest thing. It's a real grassroots project. It's nope, that's not what I want. And that's why I put the link in the original. mylink.org. Oh, it's not going to work for me. And I apologize because I did have that set up. Oh, here's the link. Silly me. Okay. We'll go right there and click to it. You know, I can't see it because the box was on top of it. Here we go. So can you all see this screen now that says my link? Is that a good? Okay. So if you see, this is the web version of my link. You can go to the website and you can decide what language you want it to be in. We have Arabic, English, Spanish, Somali, and Vietnamese. We hard translated the initial categories, and then we use Google Translate to do the subcategory. So I'm just going to choose English so I can show you. It's implemented in Lincoln right now. Central Nebraska is what we worked with. There's a Sandhills, Sarpy, and Southeast Nebraska set up for MyLink as well. And the hope is eventually, maybe this is something that'll come along with Rusty and some of the RADX app work. We would like it to be statewide. But I'll explain why it's takes a little organization. So you can see we have like the very first thing that pops up is food insecurity and information. In Kearney, we have the Jubilee Community Meals Thursday nights. We also have the First Presbyterian Church at 4511 6th Avenue, Kearney, that people can go to if they are having food insecurity. But we have also all these categories. So if you go to any of these categories, you can find information about them. You can go to domestic violence, you can click on child abuse, and it gives you the links to go to. My menu is messing me up over here. So let's see. You can go to housing, for example, domestic violence shelter. You'll see that domestic violence resources are actually scattered kind of like Easter eggs throughout the different categories, because we find that a lot of our participants actually want information on domestic violence and don't want to directly go to those for fear of being found out by their abuser. So another really cool thing about MyLink is this app, of course, would show your history on a browser. But if you're using, if you're on your phone and you're using the MyLink app, it leaves 0 breadcrumbs. So if you have been in public, downloaded MyLink, and you have let it go ahead and renew itself anytime you've been on Wi-Fi, you actually don't have to even have a digital connection or a Wi-Fi connection on your phone and able to access information. So if I went on here and I tried to look up information about domestic violence and resources available to me, it would leave absolutely no breadcrumbs. So no one else could pick up my phone afterwards and say, oh, I see that you've been looking for information about domestic violence. And then, you know, sometimes that would perpetuate more of the domestic violence issue in the home. So no breadcrumbs, no active data connection necessary, and multi-languages. This was really a wonderful, wonderful thing for us to be able to share with our neighbors here in Central Nebraska. And we did it through funding. We had an initial fund through our Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. But eventually, we were able to secure some more funding externally that came to the university that were emergency funds for COVID times. So we started out with just a small grant of like $10,000, and then we were able to carry it on through another grant through federal funding from the Department of Education that was around $130,000. The problem with keeping something like this running is a lot of people say this is the same as the 211. And those of you that are familiar with social services know that 211 is the old guidebook that you could use. You could look up sources for help for social services for community members. The problem is the 211 wasn't up to date and it was hard to access for people. So this is something that's a little easier to look at and a little easier to share. So that's how, that's how we wanted to say, hey, we want to include 211, but we want to make sure that this is even more accessible to the people that need help. Another barrier that we've had, we have employed a couple different people who are both members of the Latinx, actually four different people, members of the area Latinx community, to do some of the back end work, along with a substantial amount of help and promotion from Buffalo County community partners. And it takes someone on that back end to constantly be updating anything that needs to be updated and changed, because any information that we have, say we go to domestic violence shelter, we go to Kearney to the Safe Center, this information, the map and any of the contact info has to be updated. If there's any change to it and it doesn't get changed, then of course our constituents are not going to be able to reach the help they need. So we are currently, we're trying to find help we need funding so that we can have this housed somewhere. Dr. Diaz and I don't have the bandwidth to keep this going on our own and overseeing a worker to do it. We need the funding to hire a worker, and we need somewhere to house this. So we're hoping, and if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear your ideas through email. We're hoping to keep this moving, and hopefully too, this is something Dr. McCullough from UNMC would like to see. We'd like to get this going statewide. So that's my link in a nutshell. And so back to the projects that I've been on, because of the involvement that I've had with Buffalo County community partners, I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Russell McCullough. Some of you might know him at UNMC. He was applying for a RADx Up grant through the National Institute of Health. And RADx Up is Rapid Acceleration Diagnostics in Underserved Populations. So RADx Up, the grant, I'm not positive, but I want to say that it came in a little bit more than like $2.5 million. And that's spread out between both the UNK and the UNMC campuses. It was directed at families in central Nebraska. The monies were directed at families in central Nebraska who were involved in the Nebraska Migrant Education Program. We were incredibly lucky that we were able to hire community liaisons to work with the community who have created, now they've bridged us into relationships with area organizations like the Heartland United Way in Grand Island, and continuing relationships with Buffalo County Community Partners, Two Rivers Health here in Kearney, and many, many other organizations. And they've helped spread their work through the migrant community. And so I think Gisela is actually on this call. Gisela Marfileño is one of our community liaisons. Fernando Sanchez is another, and then we also have a new member of our team whose name is Laura Gamboa. So they are great. We also have a nurse practitioner who's able to help us with community resources and health issues, right? Jara Hinkle, who is at the clinic here in Kearney through Children's. So basically the families who are involved in this project have an app installed on their phone where they can do a symptom check as often as they can do it every day, but I think we try to get them to do it like every at least once a week. The idea is we want them to check their symptoms and see if they are clear or likely to be clear of COVID, and they can then go to school and go to work. We want to keep kiddos in school. Or if they see that their symptoms indicate that they should do testing, we've provided in-home testing for them. And Gisela, I'm probably simplifying a lot what actually happens in the home front of that. But anyway, it's a great program. And we have, I can't remember our exact number of participants right now, but we have a lot of families involved. We do intake interviews, so we will be able to carry away some interview types of studies about we can do we can find the information, we can use that information to talk about the situation of the migrant families who have been going through the pandemic, and hopefully we're going to be able to carry the project on through and keep our community relationships if we are able to receive more funding through NIH, so that, you know, this year and last year it might be the pandemic, but we know that emergencies continue to come through, and we want to make sure that we're able to serve our communities as we move forward. So this just kind of gives the general area, that Grand Island, Kearney, Lexington area. And again, we have participants that are from more, I know that Gisela and Fernando go up to the Sandhills. I know they go to Broken Bow, and I believe we have people in Scottsbluff as well. So we are not just limited to Central Nebraska. Anybody who is able or wants to participate is welcome to participate in our state. This is Dr. McCullough. And this is just the news article about when we received the RADx Up grant. So kind of closing here. I want to check my notes and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So how's it all come together? So we've been careful along the way to form relationships that are organic, and we have to be extremely wary of not excavating or mining our participants for information for research, because research is important. And of course, we don't receive funding if we're not also providing some sort of a final project or product, right? We have deliverables, but we also primarily want to make sure that we are serving the people that we're working with. We are serving community. So we've overcome some potential obstacles. We've had to develop paths of trust. For example, originally the state director of migrant education was reluctant to turn over their lists of information and invite us to programming. And with reason, she wanted to protect her participants and make sure that nobody was taking advantage of them just for a research project. So we did have to develop paths of trust with her, with migrant education in general, as well as with other organizations. How I've attempted to create enticing grant proposals. Well, one thing that I've had really good mentorship on with Richard Makowski, who used to be in charge of our sponsor programs, is making sure that if we're doing community-based research, that we are truly community up, so ground up from community. So I've worked with boards with all the different projects that we've had. Worked with boards and participants that are actually advisory in nature, and they are paid for their advisory role, and they are members of the communities that we are attempting to serve. So that helps keep us true. I'd say on Coming to the Plains, I'd say out of the 15 to 20 students that were working with me on translation, transcription, and interviewing, at least 18 of them were first generation Latinx kiddos. And so, we really want to keep it organic. And like I said before, agencies appreciate that. They like to know that we're not just in there, a bunch of people from the ivory tower of universities coming in and saying we're going to do something for the community. So I have used, so far for Coming to the Plains, I did use the Arts Council and Nebraska Humanities, as well as some local funding, but and of course, collaboration initiative through the University of Nebraska program has been helpful as well. But like I said, too, now that I've been working with Dr. McCullough and his UNMC team, we've reached out to NIH funding. So this is how I've found my way around town. And I'm hoping that this is helpful for you in seeing how our studies can do both. We can garner knowledge that can be useful for our research, but also we're here to do the stewardship of keeping our communities healthy and happy. And that is what I've got. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share right there and ask if there are any questions.
We do have a question in the Q&A. I don't know if you can see that, Dr. Warren, otherwise I'm happy to read it out.
I can see it. Melissa Contreras Norse says, with the RADX study, will you be reporting back results of study to the community memberships and participants who were involved in study? Not me personally, but now Gisela, Fernando, Laura, and I'm not sure who all else is involved in creating this. I guess all of us to some extent will be reporting. We do this quarterly. We create a report that includes demographics and some anecdotal information, but also just the basic facts about who's been served, who has tested, what the results of those tests have been, what the kind of demographics look like of the families that we're working with, you know, how many kids per family, languages primarily spoken in the house. All of that kind of information gets shared in our reports. And that absolutely does go back to communities, because we like to think of it as a two-way communication. So we're constantly requesting feedback. In fact, for the end of June, we have, I hope that, I keep saying Gisela because she's on this call. I think Gisela and some of the other rest of us will be meeting with Buffalo County community partners. And our goal with that meeting is to present that information that we've gathered, as well as say, hey, here we are. What else can we do that would be helpful for you? I hope, Melissa, that answers your question. A resounding yes is the basic answer. Yes. Other questions?
If you would like to answer or ask a question live, I can also allow you to talk if you just raise your hand. I'm happy to do that as well.
That's a really good question. Okay, so this next question says, wonderful talk. Thanks for the link study. Were you able to track what information your participant read the most? So this was actually a super interesting aspect of our work with MyLink. We've done some presentations on MyLink at conferences, but we've not published anything yet on it because we're looking at the best way. We do garner some information, but like I said, MyLink does not leave breadcrumbs. So all the information that we have is very carefully filtered to it's a completely anonymous level. We don't know who's asked what, but sorry, I just saw that there's another question that popped through. I'm terrible at multitasking. But we do have numbers of who's accessed the app and what language they've used. So as far as exactly what items they have looked at, we're not able to see it. And part of that, again, goes back to the fact that there's no breadcrumbs available. So it's been tricky, but we've still been able to garner some really useful and interesting information. We can see where they've accessed it from and where they've been, using it. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Next question is, from an anonymous attendee. It says, were promotoras de salud community health workers? Yes, utilized when reaching out to Latinx community members for health initiative programs you are part of. So as much as we could, you probably know the anonymous attendee who posted this question. Anybody who was a Spanish speaker community health worker during the pandemic was stretched incredibly thin. Two Rivers had one community health person who was trying to pretty much deal with everybody in this part of the state that had questions in Spanish at the beginning. But there also are community health members that health workers that speak Spanish. We invited, and I say we, that's actually, I shouldn't even include myself in this because I was not an organizer in what Buffalo County Community Partners did. Martha Marfileño from BCCP, she invited everybody from the administrators on down to anybody that was working in translation and or any kind of community work with multicultural that was interested, and whoever could and what really was willing to come and help, they showed up. So we would have as many as, I don't know, 40 to 50 people on some of the calls. They were like every Thursday, I want to say Thursday or Tuesday at 1 o'clock every single week. We had a really, really dedicated group of people show up. So for the answer is yes, as much as we could. And we tried to work with that too when we did My Link. And then Diane, hello, Diane. Thank you for the question. Diane says, will you apply for more grants after 2024 or is COVID studies ending? We're preparing, I say we again, Rusty and Yana from the UNMC team are preparing new NIH applications, and those probably, Diane, if I'm on through with Rusty, will come through your office. And yes, we'll continue to apply for monies because we don't want to develop community relationships and then say, oh, sorry, see you, grant money's done. That's something that none of us want to do. And Gisela actually has a better idea too about what we're telling the community right now, because it's very possible we don't get more funding, but we would really like to continue. So yes, Diane, it's not going to end.
All right, do we have any more questions for Dr. Warren today? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Warren. That was a very enlightening presentation that you gave. Your projects are outstanding. It's great to see your dedication to the community and the work that you're doing to develop those relationships and let the voices of the community be heard. That's really impactful and great to hear. So thank you again so much for joining us today for our Senric talk. And we hope that we're maybe able to collaborate or help your work in some capacity. I know I was talking to Kiana that the work that you're doing with MyLink would be great to bring on a capstone student in College of Public Health or different programs like that. It'd be a great student project. So I'm sure Kiana will be in contact. But if there's anything that UNMC can do to help, we would be more than happy to do so. And we are just very grateful for the work that you're doing. And just want to thank you again for your talk today.
Emily, thank you so much. Kiana, thank you so much. I really appreciate being part of this. Like I said, it's a different world for me, but I really like being here. So thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we'll get your slides and disseminate those out as well as the recording for today's talk. So thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you at our next Senrig. Bye everyone.
Have a good afternoon.